Welcome to the podcast Blind Faith, a podcast where we explore blindness and faith and how they sort of interact with one another. My name is Mark Madavan, and it's my privilege to be presenting this podcast brought to you by Torch Trust for the Blind. In each episode, I'm chatting to a different person who's encountered blindness or experienced blindness in a different way, and just chatting with them about blindness and faith. Today's episode, I'm just delighted to invite Sarah Dawkins. So Sarah, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. Sarah, so what's your experience with blindness?
I feel slightly fraudulent sitting here being interviewed because personally, absolutely none whatsoever. So I wear reading glasses, but that's about as far as it goes.
Yeah, that's not blindness. Okay, so thank you for joining the podcast. No. But you're the CEO of Torch Trust for the Blind. So you're the beast, the big person, the controller, the oversight.
Well, none of those are on my email signature, but maybe I should have those ones added in because they'd be great. But yes, I am the CEO of Torch Trust.
So if you've had no really experience with blindness, what brought you to that position? Why did you apply? Why are you in that position?
I'm really confident that this is where God wanted me to be, but obviously there's more to that story. So I've worked in student ministry, working for different student charities for the last 15 years. And through those, I'd grown in different skills and gifts in terms of leadership. And I really felt like God was saying there's something else, there's another thing out there. And I got sent the job description for Torch Trust. And I actually just looked at it and was like, a disability charity, I know nothing, and kind of tossed it to one side. And then the person who sent it to me said, why don't you want to do this? And I was like, well, I just don't think it's for me. And he said, okay, great. Can you give me specific reasons? I was like, oh, no, I can't. So I then that evening had a friend over for dinner and I said, okay, you know me really well. Let's go through this job description together and go and just have these reasons so that I can just tell this guy and get him off my back. And we got to the end of it and she went, I don't know what you're going to tell him, Sarah, because I think you could do all of that. And I think you've got the experience needed. And I was like, oh, okay, then let's apply. So it wasn't the most like, oh, I definitely want to do this job excitement. But it was when I got shortlisted for an interview and then I started doing more research into Torch Trust and what they did and what they're all about. I got really excited. I just kind of discarded Torch just from the name and looking at it without really knowing anything. But when I looked under the bonnet a little bit, I was like, this is super exciting. All of my years in student ministry had been about evangelism and discipleship. And that's exactly what Torch is wanting to do. It's wanting to go out and to tell people about Jesus and to help people who are Christians to grow in their faith. So actually the two things I was super passionate about were actually what Torch was all about.
Which is amazing. And you got the job. So how long have you been in the role?
So I started in January 2024.
Okay, so it's fair. You're fairly new to the task. So now you're in. You've been in sort of situation for a little bit, and you've encountered more blind people, and you're working with them, and you're interacting with them. What has surprised you about discovering more about blind people?
The biggest thing is that blindness is not one thing. I came in very naively and just thought, if you were blind, you therefore had no sight. If you're partially sighted, almost like maybe it was like fading slightly, if you put a fade on sight. But having to learn that when we say we're serving blind and partially sighted people, what that means is that we need to work in 1,000 different ways in order to serve them, because doing one thing will often just suit one person.
So I guess it's saying you discovered that it's actually about serving people, not serving blindness, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm sure you've had some funny encounters and some surprises along the way. Have you got any of those up your sleeve?
Yeah. So my second interview for this role was with the then chair of trustees, who was blind, another blind trustee, and a trustee who could see. And they were really grilling me about finances and things at this point. And I went to cross my legs. But what I didn't realise was that the guide dog that had been on the far side of the table was now sat right by me, and I kicked him in the head. So I just had this awful moment where I knew two people in the room were completely oblivious to what I'd done, but the one who could see just kind of looked at me and was like, I'm gonna have to admit to this one. And so I just said, I'm really sorry, I just kicked your dog in the head. To which the owner just laughed and said, oh, he probably deserved it. So
it's a good thing it wasn't Guide Dogs for the Blind you were working for,
I
isn't
know.
it? Yeah, because
I have told a friend of mine who works for Guide Dogs this story, and they were slightly horrified, but I promise it was an accident, and kicking guide dogs isn't what I intend to do.
well, do you know, it's good to learn on the job, isn't it? It's really good to learn on the job. And so, when you said when you're looking at the job to begin with, and you know your experiences with just sharing Jesus, but with young people, and now you're into this role. Are you seeing some of those possibilities and hopes and thoughts of your friend over that meal who said, I think you're going to be good at this? Are you sort of realizing, yeah, I think she's right. I think this is a lot of, not saying you're brilliant and the savior here, but are you seeing why God has placed you there?
Yeah, I am. And it's amazing when you suddenly see things and you're like, oh, well, yeah, no, I have got experience in this and I know how to do this. And looking back and seeing how God's given me quite random experiences over the years. And then you're like, oh, actually, they kind of come together here. And this is what I'm meant to be doing. And I think just that I'm used to working with younger people has been helpful because often people who lose their sight are over the age of 65. So 1 in 5 over the age of 65 will lose their sight. And so we tend to work with an older demographic. But there was 11,000 children in the UK with sight loss. And so Torch hasn't worked with those as much in recent years. But that's something that I'm just really passionate about. So what we do for older people is brilliant and it's great. But I really want to engage with those younger people to just say, actually, maybe Jesus has got something to say to you in your sight loss.
I think that's really interesting, and it's opening up to a new demographic really, and
Mm.
stretching the reach of this. So there's two things I want to just ask about. Is one is obviously your background is sharing Jesus, and you just mentioned it just a second ago. So is Torch Trust all about Christians? Is it only for blind Christians?
Absolutely not. We want to be a resource for anybody. So I haven't been through sight loss personally, but from the people that I know, I've been through sight loss, they've been through sight loss. Actually, it's really traumatic and it's a big, big thing to happen in your life. And, you imagine losing your eyes. And I know you, Mark, have got someone who you refer to as your eyes. And you just think, actually, yeah, it's a massive thing to lose that independence. And I think it's often in times of trauma and times of real pain that we start to ask those big questions. Like, what does it really mean to be a human and to be in this world? And what's important about these things? And that's where I want Torch to be able to talk to people. So I want to be able to say to people with faith or no faith, hey, look, we think Jesus might have something to say to you. And if they don't want to, that's fine. We'll still happily have them come on our holidays and come to other events and things that we do. They're super welcome. But we think that Jesus may be relevant to what they have to say.
Okay, I think that's really important to hear is because people with faith who are listening to this recording, will obviously find there's a lot of good connections with Torch. But if you're just thinking, maybe faith is there, maybe not, but I would love some of that support or that connection or signposting, they can still come to Torch Trust and not get it rammed down their throat. More of a possibility. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, no, it wouldn't be rammed down their throat at all. We're very open about the fact that we are a Christian organisation, but I think to be a Christian means that you welcome and love all people. You want people to come and to be loved and to feel like they have people who care about them. And so whatever they decide faith-wise won't change the fact that they're welcome at Torch.
That's cool. So I said two things I wanted to ask. The second thing is about the resourcing and helping people. And as you said, a lot of people who are suffering from sight loss and blindness are the older generation, but the younger generation obviously have different challenges. What are some of the things that Torch Trust does, or what do you think some of the things that you might think in the future you need or you're keen to lean into to try to connect and support maybe a younger generation as well as the older generation?
Well, I hope this podcast fits into that. Podcasts aren't something that the older generations tend to go to, but I know I still class myself as youngish, but people younger than me as well, actually podcasts is where they find lots of information. So we want to be doing that. And we started partnering with Scripture Union on a holiday that they run that's for families. And there was a blind girl there this year, and one of our staff members went and resourced it so that this girl could be part of everything else that was happening. So we want to do more things like that, helping families to have a family holiday, but with the support that someone with visual impairment needs. I have a real dream to have teddy bears that will tell people the stories. So, a children's Bible recorded in a teddy bear that you can give to a child who can then have something that's tangible and comforting, but also give them the opportunity to hear and to listen.
So, I mean, it just sounds a really interesting way of just trying to connect. And I think the creativity that you're wanting to bring is going to be really interesting. Because I think often people will view, especially more established charities, as in I'm blind, so they're going to give something in Braille or something in large print, but which is I know that you guys do. But it sounds like you want to do a little bit more with that teddy bear thing, or am I right in thinking that actually you want to respond to people and say, as opposed to here is the answer, to saying how can we interact to give you an answer that actually connects with you?
Yeah, completely. Um, yeah, so I was aware of a friend of a friend recently who said that they wanted to order something in large print from Torch, but they didn't because they wouldn't have been able to hold it open because we tend to glue bind the large print. And they had another disability in their hands that meant holding things wasn't possible. And so they hadn't asked. And it's like, no, no, we'll spiral bound that for you. That's not a problem. So, as you said earlier, we want to serve people. People aren't one way or the other. If you need large print, but you also need it spiral bound, we can make that happen. We will do that because we want people to have access to resources. I think it's really unfair often when I look at the amount of books and resources that I have access to as a sighted person, and I'm just so aware of what the people that we want to serve don't have access to those things. And I want to make it that there's no difference. How you get it might be different, but that you can just have the same access to the same book.
So I'm hearing that basically if I have a need or something that I'm thinking a challenge is that I can speak to you guys and you're going to try to say, well, how can we solve this, or how
Hmm.
can we journey with you to do that? So
Yeah,
it's you're not just an answer giver. You want to be someone who's going to a companion almost, and saying, well, we'll work with you and try to work that out. Is that fair?
exactly that.
And are you there now, or is that where you want to get to?
We're there now.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, people can call up today and say, "Can I have this?" And as long as we have the files, and getting the files is normally pretty straightforward, we can make it happen probably within 1 to 2 weeks. We can have it in their hand.
So great on resources and things. And because I also know you signpost people to different things, because the thing is, when you become blind, or and you get to another stage of limited sight, is you face a whole new set of challenges. And in previous podcasts, I was chatting to people and saying it just doesn't download. Here's the answer and what you're supposed to do. You're sort of working it out, and
Mhm.
it's good to have other people to journey with you. But are you saying that you're the source of all the answers? You're gonna help me with everything, and all my needs are found in you. Is that what you're saying?
No. Sorry, Mark. We can't answer everything. What we want to do though is have access to all Christian resources. So if it is a Christian resource available in the UK, we want you to have equal access to that as anybody else would. So whether that's in audio, large print, or braille, we can. That's what we want to do. We also want to help churches to be a place that people feel like they belong. So if people are just thinking, actually, maybe Jesus has got something to say to me, it's great to be able to call us or to be on a Zoom thing that we run, but it's even better to be in a local church that says, hey, you're welcome and let's help you. So I've realized since taking on this role just how easy it is to do little things that will either really help a blind person in your church or really hinder them. And those decisions, I'm yet to find anyone who's doing them maliciously, but they happen because people don't think actually most of the time. We just think of what we need.
It's interesting because my experience is that as well. And it's not that people don't think. Is I think it's people maliciously. It's that people just don't. They just don't know. Because I
Mm,
remember people ask me, "Is how can I help?" And I know a lot of blind people, including myself, going, "I don't really know. I just need help, but I don't really know what help I need."
yeah.
And I often flip that around and say, "Well, if me." who is blind doesn't know how the help I need? How in the world you who aren't blind will know the
Mhm.
needs I need? And again, I think that's that discussion thing. But as you learn things, as that sort of library of ideas and resources, that's really cool in what you
Mm.
do there. And so, does Torch Trust help for people with benefits and with access to local authorities and things like that? Do you give advice on that, or
No, we're not experts in that. And so, what we will do though is help you find the phone number or the right person for you to be talking to. So, we'll happily signpost for that. But we don't want to do what other people can do super well. We're not in competition with other charities. We just want to, we have a real niche about helping, being the place where blindness and faith meet each other.
so when it comes to support, it's things around faith and that journey. Is it the emotional response? So if I'm just been diagnosed blind and I'm trying to work that out, and I just need someone to help me, just to like, how does God fit into this and things like that? Is that something that you guys can help with?
Yeah, completely. This autumn, we're launching a chaplaincy service that will hopefully do just that, be a place where people can talk. So we're not they're not trained counsellors officially, but just being somewhere where people can listen and can help to support in that way. We also have groups that meet around the country where people who, there are people who are blind who meet together, and so actually being able to go and to listen to other people's experiences, some people find that really helpful. Other people will want to run a mile from it, and I think that's the thing, is we want to have different resources that help different people.
That I think that's really, really good. And I know it's slightly different podcasts from some of the other people I've chatted to, but wanted to grill you to find. I want some details and find out that, which is brilliant. But I want to flip it back to you again for Sarah, as you as an individual. So you're now in this role, and I think it's great. I think there's some of the things that you want to push and to explore. That sounds exciting. From your limited experience with blindness now, but it's obviously in depth, limited in time. How do you sort of square the circle of blindness and disability and faith and healing and what God can do and what God wants to do? How are you processing that, or have you come to a conclusion, or are you still processing how that all fits together?
I think we'll probably all be processing that until Jesus comes back to some extent, because there's so many big ideas there that I think our human brains will just really struggle to wrap around. I think I've been really amazed by the amount of people who have said things to me that they're like, "Oh, do you know, it's actually easier being blind in some ways," which I find fascinating because in my eyes that in my eyes, even the phrase,
I'm so insensitive. I know.
that is that's the worst thing that could happen to me.
Mm.
But one of our trustees said to me when she was reading some Braille for us a few weeks ago, and I was just like, I love that you can do this. It's just so different. And I've been trying to learn the Braille dots, not to a great success. And she was like, "Oh, but Sarah, this is so much easier." I was like, "Really?" She was like, "Yeah, you sighted people, you have all these squiggles to learn. How on earth do you do that?" And just being like, actually, okay, God has given us all different situations. It's possible to be content and to rejoice in that. And I know that I can get grumpy when I don't find a parking space. And and just being like, actually, do I really believe that God is in control of all things? And if so, that means blindness and it means parking spaces. And they're very different ends of a spectrum, but they're both things that I need to entrust to God.
I think that's really good. I think, right at the beginning, we are talking about it's people are different and people connect in different ways. And I think our needs are way. And I do know some people with blindness and disability who are very content and quite happy with that. In fact, they're going, I don't want to be healed. I don't, because this is who I am. And there's others who are going, they're continuing asking God that He may step in, because Jesus did a lot of that healing stuff, and trying to wrestle with that. And I think different people are in different ways. And what I'm hearing is that Torch Trust isn't going to sort of push, this is what you need to think and believe. It's saying, we will journey and walk with you and learn with you and learn
Mhm.
from you, along the way, which I think is a beautiful thing, because that's how I tend to approach with people with disabilities and with blindness and things.
Yeah. Well, and that's things, we can't know every situation. If we think we know, I think we're being very naive.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. And I think that that would be a naive situation. means that you can be a bit more honest with the conversation.
Yeah.
And often probably say the thing that I often say is, I just don't know.
Yeah.
But this is where we are. So
Yeah.
how do we work our way forward?
Yeah. And how do we do it together? I think that's the big thing.
That's brilliant.
Whenever you're suffering in any way or life is hard, having someone who just comes and goes, hey, let me hold your hand, let's do it together at your speed, is this the best way forward?
That's brilliant. Thank you. I want to end this podcast with the way I end every podcast, which is I asked the guest at saying, if we had a time machine and we went back to your younger self. Now, for some of my guests, that was a lot longer than for you because you're younger than me. But if we went back to the 19-year-old Sarah and the mature, experienced, powerful position you are in now, what would you say? What words of advice would you say about life, about faith, about blindness, about anything? What would you say to your 19-year-old self?
Yeah, 19-year-old me was a Christian, but I don't think 19-year-old me realised how big the gospel is. So I think what I'd want to go back and say, the gospel really is bigger than you think. And Jesus really is in control of all things. I think at 19, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And I was doing a law degree. I haven't ended up in law, and just trying to figure out what the future would look like and what it meant to have identity and belonging were really big struggles. And so I think I want to go back and be like, find yourself in Jesus, keep your eyes on him, and that will be okay. And that he will give you the experiences and the things that you need to get to the next step. I tend to worry about what's 10 years in the future. It's like, no, don't worry about that. The Bible says don't worry about tomorrow. So definitely don't worry about 10 years in the future. God has got you and he will take you one step at a time. Keep trusting in him.
That's really great. I think it's that bigger view of a God who does know all things and has all things. But also hearing alongside of that is you are thinking and planning on how might we, I guess, share that with the wider community, and that's great. Sarah, it's been a delight to just be chatting with you and to hear a little bit more of Torch Trust, but actually you and how you're interacting and thinking, and it's been great. And but so thank you for joining this podcast. It's been great to interview a whole variety of people, and it's great to have you to be the last person.
Well, actually, Mark, I don't think I should be the last person. I think, as I said at the beginning, I feel slightly fraudulent sat here, whereas you have got a lot of experience in faith and blindness. So how about we do another episode and I'll interview you?
And so we swap seats. So you're basically saying
we could swap seats.
Joy. Okay. Okay. So, well, thank you for joining us in this podcast. And the next podcast, I'm going to be the victim. But thanks for joining us, and hopefully tune in soon. Bye.
If you are living with sight loss or support someone who is, then Torch is here for you. Get in touch at torchtrust.org.